Hi friends, it's Travis Daumert. Good to see you again. It's been a minute. It's actually been a month. I don't know about you, but the last month has absolutely flown by. So feels like a minute ago, we were together at the HR Virginia event for our pre-conference workshop. And we were talking about this idea of building a people-first high-performance culture. And specifically how if we change what it's like to come to work, if we change the workplace, we quite literally will change the world. So for those of you who maybe don't remember, a quick reminder, I'm Travis Daumert, Senior Vice President of Talent at One Digital. I was joined that day by Kristen Eskew, my colleague, who is our VP of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. And we spent a good portion of the day going through why high performance and the success of our people is so critical to the survival, frankly, but certainly to the growth of our companies. How do you figure out how to inspire, how to motivate, how to connect people to this idea of why performance matters, why their influence and their impact in the world is so important. And so we did some content from a course I teach called Powered by Purpose. We had lunch discussion. And then, if you remember, Kristen talked about how do we make it safe for people to get out of their comfort zone and lean in and do hard things. So how do we create that environment that allows people to be their full, authentic selves and actually get uncomfortable, actually grow, actually lean into their work. Now, there was one more session. We talked about it that day, and we didn't have time in the agenda. That session was what I'm calling sustaining the climb. And so I want to jump right to it and share this as a follow-up. I hope there's some takeaways here that are helpful for you. This is from a course I teach on building the high-performance executive. And it really is about, how do we turn this thing that a lot of people think is a marathon into a series of sprints. So rather than grinding it out, we actually can be strong and resilient as we're trying to grow. So the first question that I would have asked you if we were in the room together is, what does best work, best life look like to you? And do you think, what does it look like for your people? Now, when we started talking about this concept at One Digital inside our company, thankfully, we immediately had people positively respond. I would call those our evangelists. They like the idea. They said, this is consistent with how I'm doing my work and living my life. Or they really quickly got on board and said, I want to pursue my best work and best life. However, to be honest, not everyone was quite ready to embrace this with a smile. In fact, this actually caused some distress. When we said we want to create a workplace where people do their best work and live their best lives, we had some people actually feel like we were making them into hypocrites. They liked the idea. They were willing to get behind the idea. But they didn't actually feel like this was real. They didn't feel like it was happening for them. They felt like instead they were trying to make it possible for their teams. Could that be you? Are you trying to take on the fires and burdens and challenges of the day so that your team doesn't burn out? Trying to protect them from burning out. And that describes a lot of leaders. And they probably wouldn't really identify with the word hypocrite. That seems pretty harsh. But they would say maybe martyr. And maybe I am martyring myself a little bit so that others can experience it. And then there was a third bucket, and this bucket's not really one that we want to admit that we have, but quite honestly, we were making some people into liars. They're like, okay, leadership team, if you're saying we're going to do this best work, best life thing, I'll say it if you want me to, but I don't know that I even believe it. I don't know that it's possible to have best work and best life at the same time. Really, my best life starts when my work stops. And therefore, I don't think I'll really experience my best life until maybe I retire, until I take a sabbatical, until I just can't go anymore. And maybe that's you. Or maybe that's some of your leaders. And you're talking about trying to support the total well-being of your people. And they're honestly thinking, you are really disconnected from what it's like to go to work every day. And I know that we had people feel that way in our company. In fact, one of the things that we saw that really led to this outcry and the support and the resources and the teaching and everything was that our burnout signal was so high. Even though we had high engagement, we had really high burnout signal in our engagement data. And so our partner Glint really found it peculiar. In fact, they were a little worried. They said, gosh, you have one of the most engaged teams that we measure among our clients in the country. So you're in a top 10 percentile of engaged companies. But you're also one of the highest burnout signals that we see. Your burnout signal's 50% higher than the American average. And we're already worried about the American average. So One Digital, like, what are you doing? And the reality was we're running hard. That's what we're doing. And we had some people running so hard they figured they couldn't stop until they just somehow finished or collapsed. And that is not best work, best life. And that is not what we're shooting for. So my goal in starting to teach this class internally was helping people actually maybe let go of some of their limiting beliefs and also give them a bigger reason to pursue this. And the bigger reason is I want them to be effective as leaders. And so I saw this study. It was done by FMI. And it took a look at these 8 competencies and said 2 of these 8 competencies matter more. Can you identify them? If we were still together in the classroom, I'd actually put up a digital poll. So I'm going to ask that you do that now. You look at it and you at least commit. Which 2 of these do you think matter the most? Let me pause for a second. When I do this with live groups, it very consistently comes in with the same 2. Now, you may not agree, but these 2 that consistently come up the most is number 2, motivate and inspire, and number 5, execute and follow through. And when that happens and I'm in a group and I look up and I see those live data, I say, wow, you guys are like most leaders that I speak to. So if you chose number 2 and number 5, you are in the majority. And people start to smile and they kind of pat each other on the back. And I'd say, and you're wrong. Unfortunately, that is not what this study found. And so then when we go looking at the rest of the list, the 2 that have the biggest impact on a leader's effectiveness, well, they're not the little orange slice. They're actually the blue slice. These 2 things account for 77% of a leader's effectiveness. And they're typically at the bottom of the list. Those 2 are being inwardly sound and others focused. Now, if you break this down and you say, okay, those 2 are worth 77%, that's like 36.5% each. You take the 23%, divide it by those 6 other ones. All of them matter. I'm not saying any of them don't matter. But those are worth about 3.5% each. You realize, ooh, if I had to choose because I'm busy on where I'm going to put a little extra effort in getting stronger as a leader, these 2 deliver 10 times the return of time and effort put into the other 6. All of them matter. I totally agree with this. However, some just have a much bigger impact on your ability to get things done in the organization, and they're often not the 2 that most people think. So, it really invites the question, what do you think your people want you to have? They want you to have more inwardly soundness, or do they want you to focus more on them? And the truth is, they probably want you to focus more on them, and that's fine. I'm just going to challenge you and say, you can't do it. Your leaders can't do it. If you want to ever be others focused, you have to become inwardly sound. It is the prerequisite to focusing on the needs of others, is to make sure that your own needs are met. This is very much an analogy of putting your oxygen mask on first. The most important thing a leader can do is put their oxygen mask on. So what does that look like? What happens if you don't do it? Well, if you don't do it, you get this study. This study took a look at this simple question. Many of my team members seem burned out at work. And when the manager's not burned out, the majority of people disagree. When the manager is burned out, the vast majority of people agree. So you end up having burnout going up by almost 2.5 times on teams where the manager is not inwardly sound. So if you care about burnout, you have to start with you. You have to start with your leaders. People cannot likely sustain the kind of intense, on-fire world that we're living in, if their boss is burning out. So we got to start with the bosses. So ultimately, we kind of talked about some different ways to think about leadership. And this is a model I really like. Now, there's some limitations of this model, but conceptually, think about leadership as being bottom up. If you want to deliver margins, financial results, the things at the top, it starts with margin in your life, in areas that people can't even see, deep, deep down underneath this iceberg where it's dark and it's cold and you're alone. Are you whole? if you don't have some margin in your life, it is really hard for you to actually cultivate the purpose and meaning that we talked about. If you don't have purpose, it's hard for you to really make the investment to personally grow. If you don't demonstrate what it's like to grow, it's hard for your people to grow. They can hear it, but they don't see it. And if they're not growing, it's really hard for them to execute on the different levels of what it means to really run the business and execute on change and strategy. So ultimately, we're imploring that our leaders start taking better care of themselves, start cultivating margin in their life if they care about their people, or they care about the business, or both, because it's all connected. We can't afford them to work so hard that they actually kill the whole thing. Okay? So let's move ahead. Somehow I got locked up there. I want to talk about how do we cultivate margin. And look at a few different buckets here. One of those things is you need margin in your calendar. So do you have time, some amount of time, to breathe? How do you do that? How much is enough? Where do you find it? Do you have margin in your energy, in how much output you can actually handle? And how do you get more energy margin so that at times in your day you can bring your optimal focus? I'm not going to focus as much. However, there's tons of content. There's so much more we could go into. I just wasn't going to basically cram a week's worth of training into our afternoon. But I did want to touch on the importance of having margin in your relationships, what that means, how to do it, and then ultimately margin in your money. And again, this might sound too personal, but the reality is, if you're financially buried, it is so hard for you to show up focused on the needs of others. So these are key dimensions that we really cultivate margin for leaders, and then they can bring that good life to their people and ultimately help their people do the same thing. So if we were together, I would have you do this activity. Discuss ways that your organization is helping people create margin in their calendars. How do you guys actually do time management these days? Does your company teach it? Do you do a class on 7 habits? Do you do something like David Allen's Getting Things Done? So, take a mental note here. Right now, time management hasn't gone away. In fact, there's more demand for it probably than there ever has been. If you were together, and I would encourage you, maybe do this as one of your own team meetings, or maybe with your leaders, and pull them in. Throw this question up. Let's select a person to debrief from each group, and the group would be to go around and actually share, what are you doing where you work? So if it's inside your company, it could be, what are you doing on your team to help people make sure they have some margin in their calendar? And then debrief. So, what does this look like? Well, one of the things that we often hear is that people are doing back-to-back-to-back meetings. We know that that's a problem. When you go back-to-back, 2 things happen. One is you often run into the other meeting, so you're late. Being late creates stress. Being late compromises quality. Being late breaks relationships. And then you actually compromise the next meeting. It starts to cascade. Creates stress, reduces quality, damages relationship, which requires a lot more energy to repair the relationships, get caught up on those things. So we would say, first very basic practice you should probably be doing is making sure people have set their meetings up in Outlook to end before the top of the hour or the half of the hour. So half-hour meetings take 25 minutes, hour-long meetings take 50 minutes. It's a setting in Outlook. You change that, and then every time you schedule a meeting, it's going to schedule it with a little margin in between the other meetings. Another basic practice we teach is you need to be taking little breaks. So people often think, breaks is for sissies. No, breaks are for athletes. Breaks are for people who are smart and want to be present and be conscious and make better decisions. So how are you doing that? Ultimately, it's making sure we're not actually pushing the entire week past about 55 to 60 hours. Now you might say that sounds like a lot. It is a lot. And frankly, if you can do 40 to 50 hours, your performance is going to be more sustainable. But a lot of people are pushing it past 60, 65, even 70 hours. You get not only diminishing returns after 40 hours a week, after 60 hours a week, you begin to get negative returns. So the additional hours you're working are actually destroying the value that you created in the first part of the week. So we got to be really careful about the example that we're setting. So here are some additional resources. I love all 4 of these. I'd say these are 4 of my favorite books. If you don't have a program, you don't need one. Get a book club going. Get some leaders together. David Allen, Getting Things Done. This is not software. It is a mindset and a methodology that really says, until you master the little things in your life, you will not have the peace and clarity to tackle big things. It is powerful. It's a breakthrough. So definitely encourage that one. You can check out a TED Talk. You can read his book. But I mean, we're talking about spend $10 on it for your team to get a used copy even, or Audible, and go through it. All of his intellectual property, I think, has now been purchased by, and I can't remember, I think it's Crucial Learning that owns them. Maybe Vital Smarts, and I may be getting those two confused. I think actually Vital Smarts renamed themselves Crucial Learning. But anyway, I think that's who has his stuff. But if you look up David Allen Getting Things Done, you're going to find who owns that intellectual property if you want to actually take a course. That's fantastic. Brian Moran, his 12-week year concept. Really just how do we think about restructuring our time in the year to get more done, to create more focus and consistency. The 4 Disciplines of Execution by the Franklin Covey team, fantastic. Chris McChesney, if you haven't heard him speak, super high energy and very dynamic. But this is about breaking out of the whirlwind, about getting your head clearly focused on leading measures versus lagging measures. And then when you get lead measures, how do I lean in and start to actually execute in a way that drives the results we're looking for, in spite of the whirlwind being very crazy and noisy and chaotic? And then finally, Traction. Traction is a whole operating system called the Entrepreneurial Operating System. This is one I recommend. I've got it handy. Have I mastered this? Absolutely not. This is simple but hard. But it is brilliant for creating a rhythm, a cadence of how to operate as a team and a company. So recommend all of these things for ways to get more margin back in your calendar. One other suggestion is that I recently met Jason Hinkle, and Jason has a company called Focus to Evolve, and he has a very heavy focus on neuroscience and sort of work optimization in Microsoft Outlook or in Google, if you've got the G Suite. But this is one I have to admit, I have not been through his training yet, but I have been very captivated by the content, the promises of it. He guarantees, I'll give you a day a week back if you will embrace a different way of working, a more optimal, efficient way of working. So, planning to go through his program soon. If you put a group together, you can check out their website. And they're not an official partner, and I'm making nothing on this recommendation other than I think this is a need, and I think his training looks very interesting, and so maybe something you want to check out. Again, given the tremendous promise of their guarantee, which is they'll give you a day a week back. I hope to go through that soon. All right. Topic number 2 is, do you have margin in your energy? Peter Drucker's got this quote: your first and foremost job as a leader is to take charge of your own energy and then help orchestrate the energy of those around you. Now, energy is not some aura or something. I'm talking about literally the calories in your body. Are you actually conscious of how you're using the energy that you have? The energy you have physically, the energy you have mentally to focus, emotionally to bring your best intentional self and be aware of what's going on with your body. The energy, yes, even spiritually, to make sure you're actually living your life in a way that is consistent with your own values and beliefs. So, what does this look like? Well, here's some content from the Human Performance Institute. Jack Groppel and Jim Layer founded this organization. They later sold it to Johnson & Johnson. And they went from working with elite athletes to working with executives. And they said, look, we're all able to tap into the same types of energy. And they call it the performance pyramid. But on the bottom is this foundation of physical energy. What's going on with your body? Calories in, calories out. How is your body doing at processing and sustaining performance over time? And then the next level is emotional energy. Really is how are you able to manage your emotions? Mental energy, how are you able to garner the maximum focus and clarity to be an effective thinker. And that spiritual energy, as I mentioned, is not spiritual religion, but really yourself beyond your physical cells, is you've got beliefs and passions, and are you staying focused on those things? And they would argue that we develop our energy, we develop our capability and our performance from a basis of physical, and it works its way up, but we develop our influence from the top down. Our influence with others comes from how consistently we are operating out of our own core values. And so we've got to learn how to actually harness this cycle. They use words like this, that your force in impact in the world is going to come from your spiritual energy. Your focus is going to come from your mental energy. The quality of your work is going to be heavily influenced by your emotional energy. And then just the quantity. How much work you can do is largely going to be influenced by your physical energy. If we were together, I'd be asking you, actually in small groups, to brainstorm. What are things that you can do to generate this different type of energy? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Well, let's go through each one briefly. If you want to actually maximize the utilization of your spiritual energy, where you're talking about your not physical self, but your beliefs, well, one is to get purpose-driven. Do you have that clear sense of purpose? We talked about that earlier in the day. Are you bringing that purpose into your work? Are you actually practicing and living out your values, using your strengths, leaning into your passions? If that's not showing up, if you're not showing up as on purpose, not actually able to tap into your passions, the things that you have overcome and that motivate you, if you're not operating out of your principles, you're pretty much losing this energy. You may be destroying it if you're working in a way that's inconsistent with this source of energy. So the question would just be, what do you do? I wish I was together. I'd love to hear from you actually talking about this. But I will give you a tip. At a minimum, you need to be revisiting and practicing your values and your purpose on an ongoing basis. So if you don't have a journal, that's the first step I would encourage you to consider. Just for a period of time, whether it's for a week or for a month. Get out something that you're going to every day and write out some aspect of your purpose, your values, your passion, your beliefs. If you have ever actually embraced affirmations, what is your ideal self? And are you getting in touch with that every day? This is an exercise that you can't say I don't have time for. It's about intention. It's not about time. Do you have 1 minute a day to live your life more on purpose? Most people would have to admit, probably. In fact, I probably blow up 10 minutes a day because I'm not working on purpose. Maybe an hour a day I'm losing because I'm not working on purpose. I'm not choosing the right things. Okay, take 1 or 2 minutes each morning and do something like revisit your purpose, revisit your values, write down a few of your key beliefs. Reaching over because I've got mine handy. So this little one digital spiral, if you were to look at it, it looks like Travis is a broken record because it's day followed by 4 affirmations and 3 gratitudes. The next day, 4 affirmations, 3 gratitudes. The next day, 4 affirmations, 3 gratitudes. I mean, it's all in gibberish, so you can't really probably read it. But it's not for you. It's for me. And so it doesn't matter if it looks like gibberish. Why do I have to do this day after day? Because that's what it takes to actually build the neural pathways, to strengthen the resolve, but also to dose yourself. I mean, this sounds so bad to say you need to brainwash yourself, but that is what you're doing. Choose what operating system you want your brain running on. What belief system do you want your brain running on? Well, you got to run that program over and over and over and realize that as a human being, that is not how we work. We typically seek pleasure, we seek rest, we seek a lower energy state because that's how we're wired, is to conserve. If you want to actually pursue purpose, intention, it's going to take something like a ritual like this. So when you're just getting started, I would say put it on your calendar. All right? Next bucket, mental. This looks like being fully present. This looks like the ability to actually be laser focused. One of the things you may want to do to harness your mental focus is think about the story that's being told in your head. What is that voice saying in your head? You don't have voices? Okay, well, that's great. No, you do have voices. And everybody does. You got a little voice in your head. Is that little voice telling you a powerful, intentional story? Or is it reacting to what's going on around you? And it's telling you you're tired. It's telling you you shouldn't have to put up with this. It's telling you some other line that is not about you being your best. Fire that voice. Again, I'm going to lean on our friends at the Human Performance Institute. If you want more on skillful storytelling, check out Dr. Jim Layer's book, The Power of Story. And really recognize, wow, the story we tell ourselves really matters. And a lot of people say you need to listen to your body. You need to listen to your heart. You need to listen to your gut. I think Jim would tell you, you need to decide what message you want yourself listening to, and it may not be the insecure, tired, fearful, afraid voice in your gut. Maybe the not best version of yourself in your head or in your heart, but instead decide. Write out that story and make sure that's the one that you're telling. Make sure that that story includes, I'm going to be focused on the needs of others. I care about others. Like one of my things that I write down every other day, because I've got 4 that I do one day, 4 I do a different day, and I alternate. But one of them is that I am positive and bring love to every relationship. And yet I'm not. But that's what I want to be. So by writing that out, by revisiting that story, when I find myself in a difficult situation, there is something automatic that says, you know what, Travis, you're positive and you bring love to every relationship. So do not attack that person, because that's not who you are. It might be what you feel like doing, but it's not who you are, and it's not what you're going to do. So think about, okay, how could you live that out? Again, might be a daily affirmation, might be something on your calendar. Next is the emotional energy. Here, things that we can do are to practice hope, practice gratitude, practice compassion, practice realistic but optimism, putting a sense of adventure back in your life. These are practices. They are not ideas, not asking you to think about hope. The practice of hope and gratitude is just like what I showed you, is right after those 3 mental focus things that harness sort of the spiritual and mental energy, come 3 gratitudes. What are 3 things I am grateful for right now? Right now, I can't help but look over the camera out the window and say, gosh, it is a beautiful day. And I'm grateful for it. I'm going to have a great ride home tonight. I'm looking forward to it. I am grateful that my kids are at home. They're not always going to be at home. Right now, that's something I'm grateful for. So, these are things that actually require work. Not thinking, practicing. And that might be writing them, saying them, telling somebody, but you actually got to use it. Finally is physical. This is the one that I think most people intuitively get, is, okay, I need to take care of my nutrition, my fitness, my sleep, and my recovery. Wait, recovery. Recovery is the one key word here. Even though it's the last one on the slide, it's probably the biggest thing that the Human Performance Institute teaches. It is the one word that doesn't seem to be in the vocabulary of most of our leaders today. And it's absolutely important that we be intentional with how we fuel our bodies. And so they do teach classes on how do you know when you're hungry? How do you know what to eat? Okay, if everyone knows, then why are we a country that is in horrible shape based on the food that we're ingesting? Horrible shape based on our lack of maintenance of our bodies and poor sleep. So huge opportunities here. But this is really where I would challenge you all. Do you have the energy margin to bring your absolute best energy, your best focus, your best self? And if not, it's because you're probably missing one of these elements. All right, I do want to talk about recovery for just a second. This is a big part of the Human Performance Institute's theory. If you want more on this, I would encourage you to check out Jim's book, The Power of Full Engagement. He really teaches, or The Making of a Corporate Athlete. It's just a short, sort of condensed version of that book in an HBR article. But the key notion here is stress is not bad. And it's probably unavoidable. But actually, we want to use stress. We want to lean into stress. Stress drives performance. It's just you can't stay stressed. Chronic stress is the thing that will kill you. And that physically is staying in a stress state where you get stress hormones flowing through your body. It's toxic. If you stay that way, we got proven long-term impact on cardiovascular disease. Your immune system is not as strong. You're talking about a significant, I think it's a 35% increase in dementia for people who are staying chronically stressed. We need to learn how to recover. The good news is recovery is fast. It's not about time. This dimension is about energy. So this is where really intentional micro breaks can make a huge difference in your life. You got to learn how every 2 or 3 hours, at a minimum, be taking 2 or 3 minutes of intentional recovery. Now, the physical example is that we know that stress is how we build a muscle. Actually, that's a lie. Stress is how we tear up the muscles, and we send the body the signal, hey, this muscle needs to get stronger. We just slightly shredded it, and we've got all these little micro tears, and then it's when we recover, when we sleep, when we rest, well, that's when all of the healing happens. That's when we actually come back stronger. So, the typical business professional has 2 different things they need to do. They're not getting enough stress, enough of a workout with the spiritual and physical dimension, typically. And so you might want to think, how can I add more of a workout, more intentionality, more intensity around practicing what I believe and actually moving my body? And then typically we're not getting enough recovery in the mental and emotional zones. And so how do I be more thoughtful and intentional? Well, the great thing is they all work together. So when you are leaning into more intentional spiritual development, typically you get some mental and emotional recovery. When you're leaning in and pushing your body hard physically, typically you're getting some mental and emotional recovery. So they work beautifully together. It might just be being conscious of which of these do I need to lean into and which of these do I need to relax from. Now, I don't recall if we got a chance to talk about this study during our time together. I think I may have brought it up briefly. But when it comes to this idea of micro breaks and learning how to stress recover, this is one of my favorite examples. It was a study published in the New York Times about extraneous factors impacting judicial decisions. And it was a study of parole decisions by judges. And it said you have about a 65% chance of getting a favorable parole decision, i.e. you're going to be let free, if you're in front of a judge in 3 very special moments. And one is the very first case of the day, and the other is the first case after they've taken a snack break. If this isn't a demonstration of inwardly sound and others first, I don't know what is. When the judges are fresh, they make very different parole decisions. It's not a function of what the inmate did. It's the fact that I'm going to lean into that person's story and I'm going to bet on this person. I'm going to say, you know what? I'm taking a chance on you. I believe in you. I've listened to you. And then somehow just a few hours later, they don't. It's not that they can't. They could grant parole. But the odds say, if you're in front of a judge after 3 or 4 hours, you're staying in jail. If you're in front of a judge at the end of the day, you're staying in jail. They've lost the ability to lean into you because they're no longer inwardly sound. So this is a very physical act that's happening. You're depleting the body and you're no longer making the same kinds of decisions. And so, again, good example of why we need to do stress recovery, why we need to do micro breaks, why you need to actually make this a practice that you do every day, not something that you think, oh, I'll take a break for the holiday. Absolutely not. You need to get more sleep. If this is not a steady practice for you, studies show that below 7.2 hours of sleep, cognitive performance falls off. Below 6 hours of sleep, it plummets, but so does something else. And that something else is really the scary part. It's you lose self-awareness. So in these studies where they don't allow anybody to sleep for 3 straight days and they measure their cognitive performance, of course the cognitive performance falls off. But if you don't sleep for 3 straight days, you know you're a zombie. If we sleep deprive you a little bit, like only give you 5.5, 6 hours of sleep, after 3 weeks, your cognitive performance compares to the zombie group that hasn't slept for 3 days. The difference is they know they are zombies and you don't. So chronic mild sleep deprivation has a negative impact on performance, but it's also causing you to not be self-aware. You don't realize that you're a zombie. So we need more sleep. Just generally as a rule, not everyone, but the vast majority of people need more sleep. I heard it said that there are some total freaks of nature who can optimize their performance on less than 5 hours of sleep. But if you took that total group and you rounded it to the nearest whole number, that percentage would be 0. So if you think it's you, I'd still challenge you, try to sleep more. Just add 20 minutes. Add 15 to 20 minutes, and then keep hacking to figure out how could I add 15 to 20 more minutes. Clearly, one of those things is getting lights out, screens off, and just to bed sooner. The next thing might be I need to rethink about when I'm having dinner. I might need to rethink how I'm planning my evening. All of those things can impact the quality of your sleep. Then you can look at the other side, which is when you're getting up in the morning. Typically, we need to get up earlier because we want to hit that exercise. So most of the challenges tend to be in the evening. All right, finally, you can do a great day, you can do great hydration, you can do great nutrition, you can do your micro breaks, and you still end up getting sort of burned out. What's up with that? Well, we know from our study of soldiers and athletes, there is a longer-term cycle that people need to observe. And even if you have amazing days, and even if you have amazing weeks, you can't go all year. Not at your best. And so what we recommend is that you develop a cadence of quarterly recovery. Is think about taking a day or two every few months to focus on you. It's not necessarily a day off, but it's got to be a day different. A day out of meetings if you're in meetings all the time. Maybe it's a day in meetings if you're never in meetings, but most of us are. So here's my recipe for a little more energy margin. One of those is micro breaks, 2 to 3 minutes every 2 to 3 hours. If you can't do that, you don't know how to do that, I often joke, drink more water. I'll let you figure that one out. But you're probably going to have to use the restroom every 2 or 3 hours, and that's your moment to take that little break. Get your 7+ hours of sleep at night on a weekly basis. Make sure you're respecting the weekend. You need a couple of days out of every 7 that are very different. Doesn't mean you can't work on the weekends, but it does mean your weekend should be different. So if you do a little work, do it at your schedule, do it from someplace you're comfortable, but make sure you're observing some time out. All right, the quata I'm not sure why this reformatted my R on there, but this is where I'm talking about this idea of blocking a day a month to be different. That if you'll do that, it'll change your life. But make sure a day a month is intentional. It is geared around great work, maybe some greater mental focus. Maybe that's a day where you are going to, whether it's from the office or from home, you're going to work from somewhere intentional. You're going to maybe get some of your best movement, exercise, thinking. But absolutely positively, at least every 3 months, think about doing a PQO. That is a personal quarterly offsite. So I think I mentioned the PQO when we were together. Some of you, I believe, followed up and asked for that. But if you want to know more about PQO, let me know. This is the idea of deep recovery. This is that idea of the off-season or the leave that the soldiers and athletes would experience. And I recommend spending several hours looking back over the last quarter. Journal, reflect, do some exercises on your accomplishments, and then make sure you're spending part of the day looking forward. Once a year, I suggest you look way forward, like over the horizon forward. Think about your bucket list. Think about your dreams. What do you dream of doing? What would you do if you could, if money and time were no object? If you haven't spent time in that mindset, you need to. It is extremely empowering. Then you need to think a little bit more about something finite, something that you could begin to plan. So that exercise is simply closing your eyes and just thinking about what would your perfect workday look like 10 years from today. And I mean get specific. So this date on this year, on this day of the week, I'm going to wake up, and what would my perfect workday start with? Get as specific as you can. Where do you live? How many floors is your house in? On which floor of your house, your apartment, your unit, your rental, your whatever, your Airbnb, your tent, your yurt, like whatever that thing is, that is you live in your best life? What is that like when you wake up? and then go through every moment of that day. Now, this exercise sounds detailed. It takes maybe 10 minutes, but it may lead to a breakthrough. To say my best life in 10 years would be that I need to change something. And that's what then brings you into your quarterly cadence. Every quarter, I take a look at, okay, what's on the 2-year horizon, and then what are the moves I'm making in the next 90 days to make sure I'm making progress toward a 2-year plan. All right? That finally ends with weekly actions and accountability. What is it I'm going to more consistently do over the next 90 days than I did over the last 90 days to achieve my goals, to start making progress, to get to the milestones that lead in the direction of my dreams? All right, so this is like some snapshots of some pictures out of the PQO. If you're interested in this, here's a QR code. You can scan that, shoot me an email, just say, hey, Travis, I want the PQO guide. I'll send you this document. There is no cost. The only thing I would ask is that you use it. Try it. Worst case is you can always go back to being crazy busy. I will tell you, if it's hard for you to commit to put this day on the calendar and then keep this commitment to yourself. It's like putting a holiday on the calendar, or a PTO day that's just for you. It's not even for your family. You're in good company. This is the hardest day of the year for me to take off. And yet I have found I've never regretted it. Not even once. So doing it twice a year, 3 times a year, or even all 4 times a year is even better. All right, some books on the topic. I mentioned Jim Lear's book, The Power of Full Engagement. He co-wrote that with Tony Schwartz. Another body of work on this came from Scott Pelton and Yogi Ripple. They had an organization called Tignum, and so they wrote this book, Sink, Float, or Swim. It's got some great ideas in there. Definitely help you address some head trash or limiting beliefs. If you're like, oh, that'd be great, but I can't do that. Yes, you probably can. You might have to make some changes, but whatever it is, you probably can. Greg McKeown, his book, Essentialism, if you're not familiar with that, breakout bestseller, came from a course he taught in the Stanford Design School, became the most popular course in the Stanford Design School. It was about designing your life and figuring out what is most important to you in this season of your life. And if you don't know what it is, you're going to have a really hard time executing on it. So how do you figure out what it is? How do you align the rest of your life so that you're executing on it? And then the final one is John Rady's book, Spark. If you have any interest at all in neuroscience, psychiatry, or psychology, like he's a psychiatrist, but he worked in this space of trying to help people with mental health issues. And one of the things he found was, wow, when people are active, they have fewer mental health issues. They become more compliant. Ultimately, he sourced studies from around the world over the last 10, 20 years and pulled them into this book that will cause you to want to move your body, because it basically says, look, we need to move. We were designed to move. And when we move our bodies, flex our muscles, keep our blood flowing, it makes our brains hum. It drives neuroplasticity, neurogenesis. You will get smarter, you will get more creative, you will get more relational, you will get more productive the more you move your body. And what are we doing for the most part? Sitting. That's for the most part. It's a gross generalization. But strongly encourage you to take a look at any of these 4 books, some of my favorites. All right, we don't have time to go into the other areas of margin around relationship margin and financial margin. So I'm just going to share a couple of books. Hopefully you have all read these. If there's even one of them that you haven't, you need to read these. If you work in the people space, you must know Crucial Conversations. You must know Leadership and Self-Deception. The Arbinger Institute's work here, it basically, it starts out with a rather obvious thing, which is if you want to be an effective leader, well, you need to learn how to treat people as people. And I first read that and thought, duh, I know that. That's kind of Golden Rule 101. It very quickly then turns the table and says, so why aren't you doing it? Why is it that people don't treat people as people? And how do you get back into doing it? And so there is a couple of very basic takeaways, but it's a parable-style book. It is fun. Is it easy? You can read this with your team. Crucial Conversations, I don't know if I could call it fun and easy. It's just life-changing. It's actually hard. It's deep. It's long. There's a ton of skills in there, but that will fantastically change people's lives, both at work and at home. I think the same is true for Leadership and Self-Deception. Dale Carnegie's stuff has never gotten old. If you haven't done it, and you don't want to read it, like, listen to it. But the idea of these basic things about how to successfully build relationships and engage other people is super powerful, and it's not going away. And then finally, Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, is a classic. It is consistent with so many things that I've learned. Some of them learned the hard way around, really building trust, building safety, leaning into other people, creating highly accountable teams. So important for a team to perform at its best. All right, my final one is on money management. Not going to go into depth here, just some suggestions. Rich Dad Poor Dad, very famous book. Get Good with Money. This was another one I saw as a bestseller, and I have not read that one, but when I read the reviews, thought, all right, this one's going to make the list. YNAB, which is You Need a Budget, YNAB. My business partner embraced this one years ago, said, changed his life. Absolutely got to do it. And then I read The Total Money Makeover and went through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University program. And honestly, I felt pretty convicted. I had an MBA. I'd taken corporate finance. I thought I pretty much knew a lot about making money and how to spend it and how to do that wisely, how to even invest money. That's not the reason that people are struggling with money. It's not that you don't know how to make it. It's not that you don't know how to spend it. And it's not that you don't know how a mutual fund works. It's that you probably have some disconnect with what money means to you and what it means to a spouse, a partner, a roommate, a loved one. And somehow you're not relating to money in a healthy way. And at the essence of it, it really teaches a methodology that says, peace does not come from how much you make. Peace comes from margin, from spending less than you make at every income level. And so we see this data. We see people who make more money and have more stress. That is not necessary. We want you to be wildly successful, make a lot of money, but actually experience more joy and happiness and be able to bless other people. So any one of these is going to have, hopefully, nuggets of truth and wisdom and things that can help your people be more successful regardless how much they make. So the last piece of this whole thing was takeaways and commitments, and that's where I would leave you today. I would say, you know what? If you've given me another 45 minutes of your life, I hope there's something in there that you're going to do with it. Please do not press stop or end this video and simply think, I need to think about that some more. No, you don't. You need to do something more. Do something different. So, in just 1 minute, don't move on. Decide. If you need to go back and look at any part of this, do that. But decide, what am I going to start to do differently? How much am I going to be more intentional in the weeks to follow than I have been in the weeks leading up to watching this? Do something that's going to give you a little bit more time, a little bit more energy, a little bit more relational margin, or maybe just a little bit more money left over at the end of the month. These are the things that are going to allow you to be inwardly sound and then move on and begin to be more focused on others. All right, I hope this is helpful. If there's anything I can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, and I wish you all the best. Thanks a lot.